IR topics. Okay, so first topic in IR will be definitely the recent joint statement given by Russia and China. So it is Russia, China joint statement on future of international relation, future of IR and their bilateral relation. So why this is in such a great news, if at all it is important? The world international politics is witnessing a clear churning in both Europe, Middle East, and all the Europe, Middle East and Asia. Ukraine issue is creating a whole lot of new security structures in Europe. It involves not only the revival of the Cold War kind of situation between Russia and US, but it also represents the historical fault lines in the security architecture of Europe. Arguments of Russians that NATO is doing unilateralism, and arguments of America and some European countries that Russians are trying to become hegemonic country in Eastern European countries. It is becoming like a zero-sum game. So if Russia under Vladimir Putin, the president, thinks that they have a genuine natural right, specifically as the sphere of influence in the neighboring countries to ensure its security against US and NATO weapons. So for this they have the historical arguments and precedents to justify. If US is saying that Putin is imperialist and therefore he is unnecessarily creating disturbances in the neighboring countries, then it is, as per the international law and sovereignty doctrine, absolutely correct. But in international relations, we need to understand that power in security both are linked always. We want to be more powerful, to be secure, but more power we get, more insecurity we may feel. So Russians or Americans, in order to increase their security by expansion of NATO, or Russians by the preventing Ukraine from joining NATO, they may think that they will ensure their security in the future long term, but the current situation is actually creating a whole lot of insecurity, not only for them, but for the whole world. In this context, this Russia-China joint statement has become momentous, because the language used in this joint statement, like friendship has no limits, unilateralism of US shall not be acceptable, IR, international relations, must respect the changing dynamics. Regional peace and stability is the US is the biggest enemy. So this language used in this, and their friendship has no limitation of any kind of area or any kind of cooperation, China and Russia. So this has further highlighted the need of both China and Russia to join hands against the Western powers. Because of Indo-Pacific policy, China and US are now openly against each other. And because of this Ukraine issue, Russia and US are totally against each other. With Russia, which properly called Russia, but in India हम लोग रशिया ही कहेंगे. So Russia and China का अचानक से जो strategic commonality हुआ है, नया तो नहीं है, but intensity इसमें आज की डेट में बहुत आ गई है. So Russians need Chinese more than ever, and Chinese need anyone who will help them in creating a coalition against the Western world, specifically US. Russians' economic conditions make them more vulnerable and too dependent on China, specifically because of the multi-$100 billion oil and gas deal of with Gazprom, with Chinese will buy Russian oil and natural gas for the next 30 years. Or export and import and political diplomatic support which the Chinese provide to Russians. It is not that Russia is not aware of the Chinese ambitions and everything. It is also not that Russians are totally in agreement with all the strategic preferences which China has today in the regional global politics. But the Russians have very less choice and a very calculative cost to pay, even if it has to pay, in making Russia-China relation their number one relation than the disadvantages that they might have, right? With this, the joint statement has become very clear because of its clear, blunt and aggressive language against US. This has been adopted. What is for India in this? Naturally, India को तो challenge जो हमने हमेशा देखा है, India needs both of them, Russians and Americans. And if America versus Russia or US versus China is there, it will be very difficult for India to maintain a balanced relationship with China because of line of action control and Indo-Pacific rivalry going on. With Russians, that we time-tested friend, and we must not allow Russians to believe that India has joined the camp of US against Russians. So we need them as well. And Americans we need simply because it is not possible for India to counterbalance China in Indo-Pacific or on the boundary without the political, diplomatic and military support of United States of America. तो अमेरिका के साथ की हमारी मजबूरी बहुत ज्यादा है. चाइना से अच्छा रिलेशन बने, इससे बड़ी मजबूरी तो हो ही नहीं सकता है. बने ना बने वो बात की बात है. एंड रशियंस से हमारी दोस्ती कंटिन्यू रहे, ये भी उतना ही इंपॉर्टेंट है. एंड टुडे ऑल द थ्री गोल्स आर साउंडिंग कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी टू ईच अदर. ऐसा लग रहा है कि ये तीनों चीज एक दूसरे के खिलाफ है. भले हो ना हो, बट लग तो रहा है. So with this, situation has become quite complicated, quite complicated. It has become tough and complicated. So with this, the diplomatic challenge for India will increase. And if the Ukraine crisis is literally going to be violent in the future, or it is protracted or sustained tension for some few more months, energy prices will further go high, which will adversely impact not only the balance of payment situation for India, but overall its relation with many oil producing countries. Right? And with this Russian-Chinese going stronger, it will be tough for India to manage the equal distance diplomacy with Russians and Americans both. I mean, Russians feel India is already in the camp of US, but India is trying to make sense with them that this is not the case, and despite our improvement in relation with the US, it is not at the cost of India-Russia relations. India-Russia relations. No. So this whole thing is quite challenging. See, in a year, basically understand, it is the game of calculation. Nothing is about right and wrong, moral, immoral. It is simply about which action in your mind and calculation gives you more benefit and less cost. So if something is involving less cost, more benefit, then definitely you will do that because this is the national interest. When countries powerful, great power like US, China or Russians, then they have more ability to protect their national interest, more ability to be realistic and very cold calculative countries. India is not in that position to calculate its national interest in the similar fashion like Americans or Chinese can do, because our military, economic, political capacity to back up our calculation, cold calculation, is not as good as Chinese or American or Russian capacity is. तो आपकी जेब में कितना पैसा है और हाथों में कितना दम है, इस बात से तय होगा कि how much calculative you will be. And when you don't have capacity, It is very commonsensically that you cannot afford to be very calculative. You know, it is like those who are poor follow morality more than those who are rich. See, because if you are rich, you don't need morality to live your life. But if you don't have money, you have morality only as your sustaining, justifying factor to live your life peacefully and happily. That is the general condition. I'm not saying this is universal rule, but this is the way society lives. Society lives. So therefore, Russia, China, both great powers, both veto powers, both nuclear powers, both modernizing nuclear weapon, both having a kind of animosity with the US. One is with Ukraine and expansion of NATO. One is with Quad, Taiwan and other Indo-Pacific areas. India इस बीच में कैसे अपनी गोटी फिट करेगा, ये आसान नहीं होगा. That will be definitely very tough to deal with the situation. Right?